The thing I've just never quite assimilated to in terms of Southern culture, college football. I have never been a fan of college football. I'm a fan-ish of professional football. My enthusiasm for it has waned over the years, but we're not going to get into that. But college football has always seemed like a different animal to me. First of all, I have a hard time working up a great deal of flair and fire for a team representing a school I never went to. I can understand people who have gone to these universities having affection for the team. I have affection for my Memphis Tigers, but I went there. But people who have never been to some of these schools, Alabama! It's like, now again, I realize that's a very, very loose argument. I've never lived in Miami or Minnesota, but I like the football teams, which is why I'm not a happy person. So again, I understand that. I also see it from the other side of it as, remembering it from a student perspective and what it felt like to be a non-athlete in both colleges I went to, in a school whose focus was on its various sports programs, and that feeling, and maybe it's just my own personal, persecution complex, my problem, not yours. But that feeling of you were never as important. Everything is always on them. I feel it now sometimes. So yeah, I've just never gotten into it. Now, all that being said, and my personal, qualms about it notwithstanding, the thing I will always say is that athletes in general, and college athletes especially, and I don't care what sport they're playing, are incredibly talented people. I certainly couldn't do anything they did, even when I was younger. So I have nothing but respect for them and their abilities and the enormous pressures that are put on them, both in the academic world and also on whatever field or court or whatever they happen to be plying their particular trade in. It's a lot, and I think we can agree. We've heard the stories. They've been coming out for years about the things going on in college sports teams and sports leagues, about some of the things that have gone on, some of the less scrupulous things that have gone on. It's a hard life to live. I mean, we all view it as this kind of glamorous, they're the gods of the campus kind of thing. And while that is true to a certain extent, as any rock star whining on behind the music will tell you, with fame comes a responsibility, and with that responsibility comes pressure, and it's not surprising a lot of people crack under it. I probably would. I'm not gonna say that they don't know how to handle it, but and in the 90s, a lot of that stuff was starting to come out. We were starting to hear about what was going on in some of these programs. Not all of them. I think it's important to stress that, but what was going on in quite a few, and it began to raise some questions about, what are we really running here? Are we running schools, or are we running the minor leagues for the NFL? And even if you are, what's going on with those minor leagues? And all of that stuff kind of came together in 1993's The Program. Okay. So this is a fun football movie. Fun's the wrong word. It's a good football movie. It's a good movie in general. Definitely of its time, but a very good film. And I think one that it's good to look at here on draft day. Since this is where so many of the characters and, those athletes are hoping to eventually end up, is on a pro team. So, for those who might not have seen it, The Program focuses on the comings and goings of a fictional college team, ESU. I believe it's fictional. I've never heard of it before. and the struggles of its football program, headed by its head coach, played by James Caan. Now, while James Caan is the name above the title, he is not the main character. He serves more as, I think the closest thing I can think of is he's kind of like the stage manager in Our Town. He's like almost like a narrator character, or a kind of link between all of these other stories that are going on the team. The other members of the team, the kids, are the actual story, and he's kind of the go-between that links them together. Now, he does have some of his own issues. The pressure being put on him is that the team has suffered 2 so-so seasons, and they really need to make it to a bowl game this year, or else it's possible he's going to be fired. So he's on the line for that. So that's kind of his through line. And with that in mind, he's now dealing with the pressures of his team, which there are several stories, but there are 2 of them that kind of take the main focus. The first one is the character of Joe Kane, played by Greg Schaefer, who is the Heisman Trophy candidate. He's a very good quarterback, but he's starting to feel the pressure of all the Heisman talk, feeling like it's all on him. This is made even more difficult by the fact that he comes from a family of, as he describes it, alcoholics and fuck-ups, and he feels like he's waiting for the time when he is just gonna nosedive. He's a heavy drinker, trying to deal with depression and whatnot, so he's going that way. The other major story focuses on Omar Epps as Darnell Jefferson, who's coming in. He's the hot young rookie. He's got a lot of speed. He actually has 2 stories going on. So the first story is that while he's there to play ball, he also is promised the reverend who raised him that he was going to get a degree. So he's trying to achieve higher education, even though he's very far behind. The other story is he gets into a love triangle with his tutor, played by Halle Berry, before she was Halle Berry, and she's dating one of the other members of the football team. So there's this love triangle going on. There are other stories. There's, the backup quarterback is caught cheating and is expelled, but then when Joe's problems get the best of him and he has to go to rehab, they have to reinstate the guy who cheated to get him back on the team, so they have a quarterback. There's one of the players is juicing on steroids and is basically losing control. But those 2 main stories of Kane and Jefferson are the 2 that we're primarily following. So what works about this movie? A lot of things work about this movie. First of all, I think it's coming at it from a very different angle. This is not, as I kind of coined the phrase, or rather stole the phrase from Kevin Smith, this is not a team of mighty duck fucks. I like the Mighty Ducks. I'm not knocking the Mighty Ducks. I'm just saying that this is not a team of, the plucky underdogs, the ragtag group of misfits. No, these are top players. They've had 2 so-so seasons. So these are guys who are playing at the top of their game or fairly close to it, but they're starting to crack, which is interesting because most sports movies will focus on a losing team and how are they going to pull this together. And this film is more focused on, will these folks get over their personal crap and be able to move past it? Some of them can't. So I think that is an interesting place to come at it. I think the characters themselves are interesting enough and different enough to really hold your attention. Now, while they're not the Mighty Duck Fucks, they are a pretty standard group of sports movie cliche characters. You know, the hot young rookie, the quarterback with daddy issues. So you've got characters you can kind of focus in on, but they alter them just enough to make them interesting. You know, Joe Kane, he's that quarterback with daddy issues, but he's aware of it. You know, he's not trying to hide it. He's very much aware that what he's doing is an attempt to escape or distract himself from the real problems in his life. He's not ignorant to the fact. I found it very interesting in the Omar Epps story, that in his story with Halle Berry, one of the things you usually get, you do have a character like this in the movie, but you usually have a character on the sports team who's willing to chase any girl he comes across, right? But Omar Epps isn't like that. His character, you get the feeling he really likes Halle Berry's character. So that when they go on their first date and she leans in to kiss him, he stops her and says, "Don't do it unless you mean it." Which is something you don't really see. You don't really see, I don't want to say this or make this sound bad, but you don't really see a lot of movies about a guy having his heart broken. You know, and you do here. It was an interesting twist on the character. So yeah, the stories are different. The steroid popper, played by Andrew, I'm going to mispronounce his name here. I tried to find a pronunciation. Andrew Byrnetsky is jacking and juicing, but you have a tiny bit, I'm not going to say you have sympathy for him, because you don't, but you have a tiny bit of understanding of why he's doing it. You know, that he wants to be better, he wants to be stronger, and, you know, now obviously you lose all sympathy for him by his actions, but there you go. One thing I gotta say, one quick thing. I did not realize until looking up stuff for this review, that Andrew Bernitsky, who plays Latimer, who's the steroid popper, in this, he also played Zangief in the Street Fighter movie. The one with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia. And that made me so happy. We may actually cover that movie on this show. But the reason that makes me happy is when people talk about Street Fighter, they always talk about Raul Julia because he's like the saving grace of the movie. But I thought Zangief was pretty fucking funny. And I find out that's this guy. I'm like, yeah, dude, change the channel. I love that. I was so proud to know that. You know who else is in this? Who I love? And he's not like a main character. He's just, he doesn't get a story. He's one of the only named players who doesn't get a story or a story arc. Andrew Benrubi, who people of my generation first came to know as Coob on Parker Lewis Can't Lose. This kind of big caveman, great at playing the dumb but lovable goon on Parker Lewis Can't Lose. He would go on to have a recurring role on ER. You know, he played Olaf, the troll, in 2 episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Oh my god, I love this guy. I love this fucking guy. He is just awesome. And it's weird, he doesn't really do anything that makes him, you know, any more awesome than anybody else. He just to look at him, you're like, that's a dude you can hang out with. I like this fucking guy. And he is such a pleasant character in this. You know, again, he doesn't have a story. But he is just kind of a player in everyone else's story. He's a support character, you know. But yeah, I just love that guy. I love him. He's awesome, and he brings some great humor to it. You know, when he's going up to the line of scrimmage and he's singing "Yippee-ki-yay-yo, get along, little doggy," you know, or they're at a reception, and he accidentally takes a piece of plastic fruit from a display thinking it's real, and he's trying to put it back. I don't know. He's just, it's a presence that is very real and very honest, and I enjoy having him in there. I guess it leads to the next thing. The performances are all pretty good, kind of standard for a movie like this, nothing Oscar worthy, but you also get some really great performances from some people who are going to go on and do some really great things. I'll be honest, I've never been a big fan of Halle Berry as an actor, because I feel like ever since she became Halle Berry, you know, she became a name, I feel like the subtext of every line she ever says is, I'm Halle Berry. Kind of the same reason I'm not a fan of Tom Cruise as an actor, because I feel like in almost every movie he's in, the subtext of every line he's saying is, I'm Tom Cruise. But I'm Tom Cruise. I'm Tom Cruise. I'm Tom Cruise. You know, so I've never been a fan of her as an actor. But she is very good in this. I think this is my opinion, I think this is their best performance. Because you can tell there's an actor there working their paces and doing their job. So she's very good. I'm willing. Yeah. Also good in this, and it's kind of a reverse typecasting for me. I've always liked Omar Epps, but I came to know him a lot and identify him a lot as Foreman on House. So seeing him go and play kind of a guy from the hood, you know, a little bit more street kind of character, is a big tonal shift for me. And yes, he did this well before he did House. But again, it speaks to how good the actor is, that he can play these two very polar opposite characters. I like that he instills his character in this. Also, he's not just, as they describe him in the movie, he's not just another gang banger with speed. He's got, he has character depth. He wants to do better. And he's the character that's really being pulled between these two worlds of what is the purpose of college. Is it there just to get you to the NFL, or is it there to help you achieve more and be more prepared for the world? And he is very much being pulled in both directions, and you can see that it's a struggle with him. The young man in him and the kid that's never had anything wants the quick fix. There's that thing pulling him towards the money and all of this, but there is the values that were instilled in him off camera that is showing that, you know, when he's getting bad test scores or when he's not achieving, that it is affecting him. And I think one, that's an important character for people to see, and two, I think it's a very good performance on his part. I don't know if this would qualify as is this movie perfect thing, but one thing about this movie is I'm never sure which side it's coming down on. You know, which side of the spectrum is it coming down on? Is it trying to say that college is just a place for these guys to get into the NFL? Or is it a thing saying, no, it shouldn't be, they should be learning and getting degrees and shit? Because it always makes it feel like when people are coming down on them for, you know, why don't you have your degree, or why don't you do this, or why don't you do that, that those people are kind of cast in the negative light. You know, they're the geeky pencil pushers, you know, but clearly the consequences it shows are on the other side. That one of the characters who I didn't talk about, Alvin Mack, who I can't remember the actor who played him, is like the best defensive player on the team. He's like the leader of the team. And he's a guy who has basically slept through all of his classes. He has a tutor who has to read things to him because he reads at a 4th grade level. You know, he's kind of a bully on the team. He takes that position of being the enforcer very seriously. But then in one of the games, he gets hurt, a career-ending injury, and they show that, you know, he has nothing now. He put all his chips in the one basket, so he has nothing. So when it shows the consequences, it comes down on the side of get your damn diploma. But when it's showing the process, it's coming down on the side of shut up, nerds. And I think that's by design, because again, we're seeing that mostly through James Caan's eyes, who is, torn between trying to keep his job and keeping his team competitive, and what he thinks is right when he has to argue to get the kid back into school after cheating. It should be noted that the reason the kid got tossed out is he had the coach's daughter taking the test for him, so she got expelled too, so he already hates this kid. But you can see kind of the conflict that he's kind of bending to the will of, we got to protect the program. The program is what's important. So yeah, it doesn't bother me necessarily, the duality, but sometimes watching it, you feel like there's a tonal shift going on. Is this movie perfect? No, it is not. Especially now, some of its imperfections are a little bit more apparent than maybe they would have been in 1993. So first off, the female characters don't get a lot to do. It's a movie about a college football team, which is a male-dominated industry, sadly. So the female characters, Halle Berry and Christy Swanson, don't get a lot to do other than be sounding boards for someone else's story, which is unfortunate, because they're two good actors and I think they're playing interesting characters, but they're not really given much to do outside of react to the man that they're on screen with. Before we move on, though, important 6 degrees going on here. So, fun for this movie. I love pointing things like this out. In this movie, we have Kirsty Swanson, the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Andrew Benrabi, who played Olaf the Troll in 2 episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So the Buffy verses have met. 6 degrees of the Buffyverse. Anyway, so that's one problem. But here's kind of the bigger problem. This is a film of its time. I've made the statement on here multiple times that when it comes to movies, you can kind of consider the late 80s, early 90s kind of the same time period. And that is sort of true, but it is equally true that around 93, when the decade was kind of on its feet, more things were starting to come out with an aesthetic and a point of view from that time, from the 90s, as young as they were. So the movie takes a very 90s look at some of these issues, whether that's good or bad. I speak mainly of 2 things. First of all, the subplot with Latimer and the steroids. Now, steroids are a big problem in sports. They were the talk of the town back then. A lot of people were getting buzzed for them. I know there was the whole scandal with the World Wrestling Federation and, their steroids and whatnot. So steroids were kind of on people's minds. But kind of like in the same way you see a lot of anti-drug things from that time, people just kind of jumped on the steroid story. And I don't think there is as much of an understanding as to what the steroids actually do to you and how long it actually takes. Now, I've never been around anybody who has studied steroids. I don't know what it actually does or what it looks like. What I'm saying is that in this film, this guy takes these steroids and he immediately becomes this vibrating, the Hulk, basically. I don't know if that's how they really affect the body, but it doesn't seem like it to me. Furthermore, and I think this is part of the story, but and I get that, but there's still a point where suspension of disbelief is stretched to such a point. You're just like, okay, the coach, we're pretty much informed that the coach of the team is aware that he's taken these steroids, but he's overlooking it until it can't be overlooked anymore. But I'm sorry, if you see a dude who finds out that he's on the team and to celebrate runs out into the parking lot and starts to smash his head into parked cars and break the windows with his skull, that to me seems like a pretty good warning sign. Now, this could be an indictment of just how much steroids were overlooked back then, but I don't know. You'd have to be, and if it is, then well done. It's, but you got to be a pretty cold and pretty, unscrupulous son of a bitch to see something like that go on and not do anything about it. Likewise, this is just a minor thing I noticed. So I talked about the character of Alvin Mack, the guy who gets hurt. So we get the impression that he's a pretty tough guy. We get the impression he comes from a hard background. But there are some times when you're watching this kid and you're like, all right, if you're not getting this guy psychiatric help, then I think you're really failing. They do this great juxtaposition scene where he's with his tutor, and the tutor is trying to get him to answer questions, and he's just very flippant about it. He's like, I don't know, he doesn't know, he can't retain the information. And then the very next scene, they're in a meeting with the defense, and he's showing them slides of the various looks, and all of a sudden they go, triple slap back, hooter back, unless the quarterback slaps. Right. So that he can recognize all these looks just in an instant and know what to do, but he can't remember history. But he's doing this, and he's getting steadily and steadily darker. He's like, hit that guy so hard his girlfriend dies. Kill everybody. It's like, okay. And there's a difference between again, I've never been on a football field, so I don't know what is being said out there. I assume they're not quoting Bible verses to each other. But there are some fucking things he says out on that football field that you're like, dude, you need some help. You really do. Anyway, all that being said, all that being true, I think it's still a great movie to illustrate kind of the pressures these kids go under, how some of them can handle it, some of them can't, how coaches have handled things, how they shouldn't. And it does feel a little bit sometimes like an after-school special, like you feel like the teacher's going to stop the movie and go, okay, kids, now if you saw a player doing this, what would you do? It's still a good movie. It's a good sports movie. I know that with the current situation, so many people have been missing their sports. So maybe watching this can give you some of that same rush. It's a good film, and I advise people to check it out. So that is just part one of our draft day doubleheader. We got one more coming up. So I hope you all are doing well. We're getting through it. Keep calm and carry on. And as always, drive safe. And I will see you at the movies.